everyone. My name is Francie Lin. I edit the book section of the Boston Globe, and I'm here to talk with the judges for this year's Boston Globe Horn Book Award. Erica Marks, who is the chair of the committee this year. Hi, Erica. Erica is the Youth Services Program Director for the Cleveland Public Library. Welcome.
Thank
And
you.
we have Roger Sutton, who is the Horn Book Editor-in-Chief Emeritus. Roger, does that mean that you're semi-retired now? Are you retired now?
Yes, I'm about 3/4 retired.
Quarters retired. And the third judge, Martha Pavaro, was not able to be here today, but she is also a longtime Horn Book editor. So Roger and Erica, I know you both bring very different things to the table as judges for this award, and I would just love to hear a little bit about how your different personal and professional experiences have shaped your views on, what constitutes a Horn Book Award-worthy book. Like, Erica, I know you have a lot of experience in public libraries. It sounds like you've done some really amazing youth programming. You're a mom, you're a mentor, you're a coach, you're a writer. How do you feel like that mix of experiences has, sort of influenced your thoughts about books generally and specifically about the Horn Book Award winners?
Sure. That's a great question. I think my experiences really helped me when I evaluate books. And, I always think about the reader, right? And so that allows me to kind of put myself into the reader's shoes and have a broader sense of all of the amazing books that we're looking at. But I would also say for me, I tapped into my experience in serving on the Coretta Scott King Book Award Committee, as well as the Caldecott Book Award Committee. And I was just so thankful to serve on this committee as chair with Roger and Martha, and I appreciate them so much.
Well, thank you. We appreciated you.
Thank you, Roger.
And Roger, you can you tell us when you started at Hornbook?
1996.
1996.
So,
So what was the children's literature landscape like then?
well, it was pre-Harry Potter. Harry Potter came out about 2 years later and changed absolutely everything.
So take us back to that time.
Well, it was still the same. I mean, I grew up in the children's book world of the 80s and 90s. And I feel like that was kind of one long continuing stream. You know what I mean? No great books, but no particular surprises. The internet was creeping in by the mid-90s. And there was that, but then Harry Potter really changed everything. I mean, the numbers that Harry Potter sold were incredible. And that made print runs for everybody go up. Fantasy, which had been moribund pretty much since the 1970s, came back with a vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Books, worldwide phenomenon books became a thing with Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
So it really did affect the rest of my career as editor of the Horn Book. But, I always appointed the Horn Book judges. That's been my only contact with this award. I've never served on the committee before. And my job was to just pick 3 people who I thought could work well together and come up with a list of no more than 9 books that they really loved. So I thought, because someone had to drop out because of illness, and I said I would do it this year. And I thought, oh, it can't be that hard. It is so much work, Erica.
Yes, it is.
It's a ton of, I was just not prepared for the hundreds and hundreds of books came to my house. My husband was not prepared. My dog was not prepared. There were books everywhere. So there's a lot of stuff to just handle physically, as well as a lot of reading.
Absolutely.
Well, I find so after the Harry Potter thing, do you feel like that was like a positive thing?
I think it has good things about it and bad things about it. I think that expectations rose, which can be a good thing, but it also meant we had lots of more commercial fiction, and I think there was then the chance of smaller books being lost. And we saw that, though, being addressed by the We Need Diverse Books movement in the 2010s. Am I right, Erica?
Yeah.
that's when it started,
Mhm.
that really helped books that didn't have blockbuster potential because they were quiet, because they appealed to a smaller number of kids, whatever it might be, gain ground. So I'm really happy that that happened.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I'm not even sure I remember what it was like I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s as well, so that was pre-Harry Potter, but it just seems like a complete other generation. I find the Horn Book Award so interesting because the categories aren't really confined to like a particular age group. Last year's picture book winner was Jason Reynolds's, Ain't Burned All the Bright, which was, about a kid in lockdown during COVID. And looking at it, it's not, it's this beautiful book. It's not the kind of book that people naturally think of when they think of a picture book as being aimed for, very young children. And, like the nonfiction cohort this year, the winner and the honor books, there's Sunshine, which is a graphic novel about children at a camp for children with cancer. And then there's H is for Harlem, which is a gorgeous alphabet book about Harlem. And then there's Choosing Brave, a biography of Emmett Till and his mother that is done in these, gorgeous woodcuts with just a really sensitive, amazing text to go with it. And I imagine that the greater pool of this category was even more, disparate. How do you choose between such a disparate group of books? Like,
It was really challenging, just kind of going back to what Roger said, because we received so many books. Like I've never received this many books ever. So it was really challenging. But I would say for us, for our group, what it really narrowed down to is our own thoughts on what represents excellence and what excellence looks like, but also how our readers of today going to connect with these books. And so I think we did really, like, as you just mentioned, some of those titles, we really have a wide array of various books with excellence and different topics and genres, and so it was challenging, but very happy with what we chose. And again, just hearing all of our different perspectives, having all of us add to the conversation, being honest in our conversations, which I really appreciated that. I think that's what helped us choose the books that we chose.
And I don't think you're trying to create a list of it's usually 9 books, one winner in each category and 2 honor books. I never had a sense that we were trying to get a little bit of this and a little bit of that and one of those and one of these. Erica, from Caldecott Committee that's you look at each book on its own terms. I remember serving on the New York Times Best Illustrated list one year, and we had 4 books about dogs, 4 picture books about dogs. But those were the books that we thought were terrific that year. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're doing. You're just trying to find these 9 excellent titles and working out among the judges what this particular group of 3 is going to mean by the word excellent.
That's very heartening, actually. Your story about the books about the dog books is actually very heartening, because sometimes I feel like people can look at, from the outside, and it gets kind of cynical. They're like, oh, they're trying to just sort of spread things around evenly without, necessarily trying to think about it in a different way. So that's actually very nice. Let's see. What else did I want? Did you guys have like a point system or something, or did you just talk it all out?
We talked it out. We had great conversation. We talked it out, and again, we were honest. And me serving as chair on this committee with Roger and Martha, people who have amazing professional background. At first, I was a little nervous, right? But the conversation was so authentic, it just flowed. The way we connected with some of the stories and our thoughts on some of the stories. Our conversation and the way we came together, it was amazing.
And always polite. I remember, I'm not going to talk about the book, it's not on the list, but there was one I was championing, and I could tell that Erica quietly inside, always smiling, is like, over my dead body.
And we all had a book though. We all had a book, but we did not have a point system. Really, we just kind of narrowed our list down, and then Roger had a special, it was like a trick. It was beautiful. It was a way for us to list the books and look at not just are the winners that we have, but all of the books that made our final list.
Mm-hmm.
Just going through the whole list and just briefly talking about each one, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
that's
so
great.
yeah, so we all had our it wasn't just we all had our favorite, like that not favorite, but that book that we were championing for, and somebody would be like,
Yeah.
no.
But y'all
Never.
came out friends.
Yeah.
Good.
But I appreciated that. It made the process like much smoother. Like, just we didn't beat around, we were honest, and it made the process much smoother.
That's terrific.
That
Wow.
was a trick I learned at the Hornbook, that every year we do fanfare, which is a list of our favorite books of the year. It's about 25 titles. And when we think we're done, we picked our list. I had the staff take the physical books and arrange them on a windowsill. We had this conference room that had a long windowsill, and line them all up. And I said, okay, what doesn't belong here? And you would find one that, oh, gee, I really like those 15 books much more than this other book. Maybe this should come off. So
Oh,
it's
interesting.
really helpful.
That is,
Mhm.
wow. That I did not heard of something like that before. That is really interesting. Um, I was gonna, I wanted to talk a little bit about representation in children's books, because that is obviously so important in books for children and young adults. There's such a power in being able to see your story and your experiences reflected in, a novel or in a poem. The Globe recently did an interview with the poet Richard Blanco, who is a queer poet of Cuban descent, and he said something really interesting that's kind of a corollary to this idea of representation. The interviewer asked him, are there poems that spoke to you about being Cuban when you were growing up? And he said, yes. Or were there poets that spoke to you? And he said, yes, Elizabeth Bishop, who of course was not Cuban at all. But, she was orphaned when she was young. And he said that, she moved around so much that this idea of, he really felt this idea of exile through her poetry. And then he said that he hopes that, if he can see himself in Elizabeth Bishop's poetry, he hopes that others can see themselves in his poetry. So, the Fiction and Poetry Award winner, Warrior Girl Unearthed, is about a young Anishinaabe woman. And I'm just wondering, and maybe this might be more of a question for you, Erica, since you work directly with children, what do you tell a kid who just assumes right off the bat that there's not going to be something in this book that's for them, like, because it doesn't seem to be about somebody who looks like them or whatever? Is there, do you run across that a lot, or how do you approach that?
I would say that there's always something to be learned. But also I'm really good at, because I felt like that as a child. Before the We Need Diverse Books era, it was really difficult to find books that represented various people. And so I will go pull a book off the shelf, or I will go find a book for that child, right? Like, everyone wants to be seen and everyone wants to be heard. And for me personally, while I have served on all of these book award committees, I mean, I have to see, I mean, it's just so important, like some type of diversity, especially in today's world. So again, there is, especially with Warrior Girl Unearthed, which is why we all championed for that book, which is why it was our one of our winners, because it's about a story that needs to be heard. It needs to be discussed and talked about. Even for me, I'm 37, and I'm relearning information about indigenous culture that I didn't learn in elementary school, right? And I'm learning a lot of this information by way of YA and children's literature. And I think children's literature in general is a great way to shine light on some of those hard topics or discussions that people are afraid to have.
Mm-hmm. No,
But,
absolutely.
but at the same time, I think Warrior Girl on Earth impressed me so much because it did wrestle with big issues of identity, but at the same time, it was a great mystery novel.
Yes, yeah.
And so the storytelling in that book is absolutely superb, and the characterization. It's not just the themes. Everything worked together so well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was very impressed with the characterization of Perry also. So, I wanted to turn a little bit to the picture book category now. So When You Can Swim by Jack Long, what was it about? I mean, this was, a personal favorite of mine in reading through all these things, not that I'm on the jury or anything, but what was it about this book in particular that called to you? Was this one that was sort of like unanimous, or I mean, I'm sure everybody did love that book, but what about it specifically did you guys really like?
So
Martha,
I'll
got that
oh
one first.
yep, that's what I was going to say. Martha brought that book to our attention. I don't think some of us, we were missing some books, Roger and I. And so Martha made sure she put that one back on our radar. And when I read that book, just the illustrations, the text, the diversity, which it was so important. It was inspiring as I'm reading this book. I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is just beautiful. This is a book that the world needs. And so yeah, it became one of my favorites, but Martha definitely was the champion for that one.
Martha, when we worked together, which we did for 28 years or something, she was always my guide to picture books. I think she knows more about picture books than anybody else in the world
Mm.
and knows how to articulate. So why the heck isn't she here? Because she really does know how to talk about what makes a good picture book good.
I read the little note, the author's note in the back of the book by Jack Long, and I found that just so touching. And I'm curious, when you guys read books, if there's an author note, do you take that into consideration when you're judging it, or is that kind of just off to the side?
For me, yeah, I won't say I take it into consideration, but I do read it, right? It may help shine light on the story more. And I kind of like to know what were the author's thoughts or the illustrator's thoughts as they were creating their book. So I do read it, but I don't necessarily take it into consideration.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Roger?
Well, when we would get advanced copies of the Hornbook, they often came with a letter either folded in or bound into the galley from the author or from the editor about, what a life-changing book this is. And mostly it was just sort of opportunity for hilarity within the office, that your book has to stand on its own. If it's not in your book, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not there. I don't really care why you wrote it. I don't really care how it made you feel. I'm more interested in what it makes readers feel. So I don't pay a lot of attention to authors' notes.
All right, interesting. So I was thinking about this when I was reading all these books, and I'm going to tell you a little story from my childhood. um, so my parents immigrated from Taiwan in the 60s, and they were not readers, and they were particularly not readers in English, but they were aware that reading was very important. And so, but they didn't really know what to get. So I think what they did was they just looked at like the list of Newbery Wars and the list of Caldecott Wars, and they either bought or like borrowed all those books, and like that was my library. And I'm kind of wondering if you guys have that idea about, longevity in the back of your minds when you're reading things, or, what kind of influence do you think awards like the Hornbook Award have in the, in the wider reading culture? Sorry, it's kind of a big question.
No, I'll start. I would say that to me, when you think of a book with excellence, and this committee, previous committees, we have like a set of rules that we are a guide, right, that helps us make the book selection. But this, the Hornbook, what I enjoy so much is it was just excellence in general, right? And like Roger said, your book, any book should be able to stand on its own. So when I think of a book that represents excellence, I do, in my mind, consider like classic stories. Stories that will always have some type of relevancy, stories that will always be relatable, where children can see themselves and find themselves or be able to relate to the story at hand. So yeah, it was that was a broad question, but I would say I feel like the books that we chose are books that will I mean, I'm just thinking of Choosing Brave, like, all of our books, just they represent so many different groups of people, so many different stories, and I definitely believe that, these are books that could live on the shelf and fall in that excellence category for years to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know which books are going to live forever. I mean, the Newbery and the Caldecott books aren't selected to live forever. They're for the most distinguished contribution to children's literature that year. Some of those books live for decades and decades. Others disappear. And then there are other books, my favorite example is Ramona the Pest, classic book, didn't win a thing, So with the Bosco Hornbook Awards, when I was the editor, people would often ask me, what effect do you think this has on a book success, a book sales? And I think it really depends on the book. One year the judges chose Louis Sachar's Holes, which also won the Newbery Medal and the National Book Award. I think that the impact the Hornbook Award had on that was probably negligible. But I think smaller books and books from smaller publishers and books that don't get big advertising budgets are really helped in an award like this. It's also much more idiosyncratic, the choices, because Newbery and Caldecott are each chosen by a committee of 15 people. And 15 people are going to choose something very different from 3 people.
Right.
I think it's math.
Right. I have friends in who are children's book authors, and I think for them, they were like, if you win the Newbery Award or the Caldecott Award, that is, your book is going to be in print for, a very long time. I imagine the same is true of the Hornbook Award. Although I'm not sure that is true. I'm not sure in terms of longevity in terms of like being in print still. But that's
I look at old issues of the Hornbook, like issues from the 20s and the 30s. I'll see rave reviews. I'll see advertisements with quoting glowing reviews from all the journals. And I'm like, I don't know what this book is. I've never read this book. But we're not choosing for the ages, is my point.
I see.
The ages are going to have to settle that for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
That seems so.
I would just, Francie, you mentioned your parents and how they would look at those lists. I would say, if I put my previous children's librarian hat back on, having those list of books, the various list of books, or being able to refer to the books that have been selected for any award are sometimes helpful when you're trying to provide books for families who are unsure, or kids who may not know what they want to read. You're trying to select the best book, right? And so, even if it is past time, sometimes it is helpful being able to reference these amazing, awesome, award-winning books out here.
Right. Well, I still have some of those books on my shelf here. So, they were really beloved. So, but I feel like it's actually great that there's so much more variety now, because, I feel like everything I read, there was all, I still love Dicey's Song and, all those things, but, yeah, it was very white for sure. And, so,
pretty literary.
Yes.
And I saw this when I was a librarian with parents who weren't readers who came in for books for their kids. They only wanted their kids to read award-winning books. And we as readers know that that's not what reading is about.
Mm-hmm.
If
Right.
I only read award-winning books, I'd kill myself. You really need a variety of things.
Yes.
That's very refreshing. Yeah, that was not what my parents were like. So anyway, so I know that Hornbook is turning 100 next year. Is that next year? It's been the next year is the
2024.
centennial. And this may be more of a question for you, Roger. And I don't know how much history you've kind of looked over, but are there sort of what do you think the key is to Hornbook's institutional longevity? And are there, moments in its timeline that have, really seen a directional change?
Oh, lots and lots. I mean, the Hornbook life is coterminous with children's book publishing in this company,
Mhm.
in this country. That children's books really became a thing in the beginning years of the 20th century, and that's when the Hornbook began in the early 20s, first as a bookshop and then as a magazine. And, children's librarians were blossoming. Publishers were responding to that. So all this stuff kind of grew together. And I always felt that my job as the editor was to keep it going. That was the main thing, was to make sure the Hornbook survived.
Mhm.
And it's had its ebbs and flows. It's had, I think at its height, we might have had 22,000 subscribers. So it's always been tiny.
Mhm.
But I feel like in some ways the Hornbook is a conscience for the
Mhm.
field.
Mhm.
Kind of beholden to nobody, not afraid to say what it thinks.
Mhm.
So, and I'm really proud that I could make that happen for the times I did, and for all the men and women before me, and Alyssa Gershwitz after me, doing the same thing. It's great to be part of that chain.
That's terrific. Yeah, I don't feel like there are not many institutions like that where, they're sort of free agents and can say what they think. That's spectacular. Well, it seems like we may be out of time now. There were so many other things I wanted to ask, but
Can I do one thing before we go?
absolutely.
I just want to show my tie that Holly Robinson, who was our designer, made this for me when I retired. And it's pictures of Boston Globe Hornbook Award winners, silk screened.
I love that tie.
That's terrific. Is this just a one of a kind thing? It's not for sale
Yeah,
anymore?
just made the one.
You should have a shop. That's terrific. All right. Thank you both so much for having this conversation. And it was so great to hear a little about the judging process and your own personal thoughts. Good luck in the coming year. And I will hopefully see you.
Francie, come to the party. There's going to be a party next year.
Oh, I would love to.
Party.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.